Hi YouTube, it is Amber. So today is Saturday on the F to M Sweethearts channel here. I've got a little mood music in the background. This is actually a new album that I've come across by ZZ Ward, and it's a song about hooking up with a dorky guy. Seemed like it was kind of appropriate for the week's topic of sex. So I'm not particularly planning on talking a whole lot about my personal sex life because that makes me a little uncomfortable in this public of a forum. Kind of similar to Marianne, I'm happy to say more about this in a one-to-one conversation. It just makes me a little uncomfortable in this really public forum to be talking about my sex life. So some of the topics we're supposed to address this week are around dysphoria, around changes in our sex life, and around kind of tips or tricks or thoughts for other folks. I've definitely seen since Shu started T about 11 months ago, his sex drive is through the roof. I guess maybe about 3 weeks in or so, it was absolutely off the charts to the point where I was like pushing him away, and it kind of settled out for a while, and then now it's kind of driven back up again. So that's really interesting when your sex drive is not necessarily at the same level as your partner. It requires a lot of communication and being willing to go for it when you're not necessarily in the mood, or to tell them to leave you alone when you're really not in the mood. In terms of dysphoria, Shu has very, very little dysphoria. So that's actually made it really easy for me. I really struggle on the Facebook group when folks are asking about, or in other groups I'm in when people are talking about dysphoria, because he has very little of it. So that in a lot of ways makes things a little easier, because our sex life hasn't changed a great deal since he began T, because he doesn't have a lot of dysphoria, and so there aren't really any off-limit things that were within limits prior to T. I was thinking about this topic this week, and I think one of the best things that I've heard around helping folks think through how you should be sexually with someone is from Dan Savage, who's one of my favorite podcasters. And he talks about being GGG. So for people who aren't familiar with him or with his writings and podcasts, the concept of being GGG is that you are good in bed, so you do what you can to learn about your partner and how to be good in bed. That you are giving, which is the second G, that you're giving of pleasure, that it's not just a one-sided sort of thing in the bedroom. And then the third piece is that you're game, that within reason, and everyone has their limits, that you're willing to try just about anything that your partner wants to try, as long as it's within your limits. And so I think those are kind of good. It's a good way to think about a sexual relationship, that if you're with someone who works hard to know what they're doing, who wants to make you happy, and who's willing to try things, it makes everything a little bit easier. I think those were pretty much the things we were supposed to talk about this week. I'm trying to look and see if there are other things. There's also the question of, is talking about sex very awkward? For me, I talk about sex pretty easily, maybe too easily for some people in my life. I think it comes with the territory in some respects of being an advocate for the LGBT community, or trying to be an advocate. And I feel like Americans in general get really squicky about sex because we are told in so many ways that we shouldn't talk about it, and it's this dirty, evil thing, when it's a natural part of life. And so I speak pretty easily about it. And I think what makes it easier is acknowledging that it's awkward, like acknowledging that we all have our own uncomfortableness around it, and admitting that on the front end, and then just saying, I'm just going to talk about this, and if I get a little giggly or I get a little awkward, then I'm just going to work through it. So I think that's really all that I have to say on the topic. I feel like this was a very disjointed video for me. I do want to finish by saying I'm actually recording this on Friday evening, so we're still getting a lot of information about what's going on in Connecticut, and just want to take a minute to say that I'm definitely praying for the victims, for their families, and for the little kids who saw a lot today, and are going to have to deal with that for many years to come. So hug the ones you love and hold them tight tonight and today and tonight and for the rest of your lives, and make sure you tell people you love them. So see y'all next week.